Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Clarence Barbie, and the video that I'm going to present to you today is the 2009 Black History program from Blackburn Alternative High School in Omaha, Nebraska. In 2009, I was a paraprofessional with Blackburn High School, and it was my duty to help the kids put together their Black History program. So what we ended up doing was that the kids did a lot of research on Black history, and each one of them had a certain time period in history, in American history, to research in dealing with African Americans. What they did was that they did their research and they wrote excerpts for the other research that they had done. The other thing that they did was, because it's a slideshow, they actually found a lot of pictures that were relevant to what they were talking about. The other thing that they did was that they were actually able to find a lot of video pertaining to a lot of time periods and different people and things like that. So if you can tell from the video, these kids worked extremely hard on this. It's an absolutely fabulous video. You actually hear them doing a lot of their own reading from the research they put together. So, with no further ado, 2009 Blackburn Black History Program. Thank you.
It is known as the peculiar institution slavery. It was the action of kidnapping a people from a continent, robbing them of their language, their belief system, culture, and history, snatched from their African homeland, and shackled to a ship with thousands of others from different tribes. These Africans survived the dark, the heat, and the sickness of the Middle Passage. Once upon the American shores, they were paraded around like dogs on a collar, to be sold at market like an animal. After being sold, these stolen Africans were placed on plantations for work. The fields of tend to the chores of the house from sunrise to sunset. There were hardships for the slaves, and there were feelings of righteousness by the slave owners, because they felt like they were doing the religious duty for introducing these people to Christianity. There were slaves uprisings such as Nat Turner Revolt, and because of a sense of freedom and justice, these arose group of people who did not agree with the institution. They became unknown as abolitionist people, such as Harriet Tubman, who escaped from slavery and became a conductor of the Underground Railroad. Thaddeus Stephen, Frederick Douglass, and Sojourner Truth, who spoke out against slavery, became well-known people in history because they had the courage to do so. Because of these and other pressures, the President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, was forced into one of the Americans' greatest wars, the Civil War. The Civil War was the only war fought in American soil. It fought from 1861 to 1865. It was known as the War Between the States because America was split, one side being north, the other side being south. The war pitted state against state, brother against brother, and came to an end with the slaves being freed. During this war, many men died behind their beliefs. The South felt that they had the right to own slaves. Led by Jefferson Davis, they separated from the Union and called themselves the Confederate States. The Union was led by Abraham Lincoln. The Union also had all black units to fight in this war. This was the first time the blacks were listed in American armies. In 1862, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves. The Confederate States were defeated in 1865. Because the slaves were freed, but had no guidance, Lincoln set up the Freedmen's Bureau to assist them with education, health care, and employment. The people in the states hated the Freedmen's Bureau and felt the federal government was helping the former slaves at the expense of white people. Reconstruction was a time period after the Civil War, in 1865 through 1877. This was the time when the South was rebuilt from the war. Former slaves were made citizens, given rights, and elected as governors and senators.
For the first time in American history, there were black elected officials, such as PBS, Pitch Black, and Herman Revels. There was also a time period where the Constitution amendments to protect the former slaves. The 13th Amendment freed the slaves, the 14th made them citizens, and the 15th gave freedmen the right to vote. After Lincoln's assassination, the South wanted to get federal troops out. There was a political compromise in 1877, which ended in the Reconstruction period. This left the slaves alone to deal with their former slave owners, who were mad at them because the South lost the war. The South began to make Jim Crow laws, which disenfranchised blacks, and this law would stay in place for almost 100 years.
The Harlem Renaissance refers to the flowering of African American intellectual life during the 1920s and 30s. At the time, it was known as the New Negro Movement, named after the 1925 anthology. The New Negro, edited by Alan Locke, though it was centered in the Harlem neighborhood of the New York City, many French-speaking black writers from African and Caribbean colonies that lived in Paris were also influenced by the Harlem Renaissance. It was highlighted by writers such as Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston. Jazz musicians such as Cab Calloway, Billie Holiday, and Duke Ellington began to bring people together through dancing in good times. Political and intellectual leaders such as Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson, and Booker T. Washington began to humanize blacks and change the opinions of whites. African Americans were also making strides in the sports area, as well as with heavyweight champion Jack Johnson. The Harlem Renaissance grew out of the changes that had taken place in the Negro American community since the abolition of slavery. These accelerated as a consequence of World War I and the great social and cultural changes in the early 20th century. Industrialization was attracting people to the cities from rural areas and gave rise to a new mass culture. Contributing factors leading to the Harlem Renaissance were the great migration of African Americans to the northern cities, which concentrated different people in places where they could encourage each other.
Hey folks, here's a story about Minnie the Moocher. She was a low-down hoochie-coocher. She was the roughest, toughest frail. Minnie had a heart as big as a whale. Heidi, 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 ho! Heidi, 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 ho! Eddie, 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 Eddie! Eddie, 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 Eddie! Whoa! Heidi, 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 ho! Heidi, 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 ho! He gave her his townhouse and his racing horses. Each meal she ate was a dozen courses. Had $1 million worth of nickels and dimes. She sat around and counted them all 1,000,000 times. Howdy, 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 howdy. Howdy, 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 howdy. Howdy, 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 ho. Howdy, 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 ho. Scoodly-boo, 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 Poor You win.